we're in Pei Alpha base. Last time we spoke about one reason why people suggest why milk should not be mutter. Just in short, because it's an introduction for what we need anyhow for today, is that we can only milk from an animal that's a trefa. That's what Adi was talking about. Milk from an animal that's a trefa is not kosher. We only know that an animal is not a trefa because when you shech the animal, do you know that it's not a trefa? Until you shech it, you don't really know that it's not a trefa. But the reason why we drink milk is because the Gemara says most animals are not trefas, and therefore you can drink the milk because you can assume that's not a trefa. So last time we talked about whether that's true nowadays. Are roiv animals not trefas? Okay, but today we come from a different angle, and we'll accept that roiv animals are not trefas. But then the question is like this: we talked about when we learned Kashrus in Sim Pedalad, we talked about that the reason why we check lungs, over all other trefas is because the lungs have a miyud hamatzi of being trefas, and at that time we said, well, generally accepted is that a miyud hamatzi means that it's about 10%. So that means is, because we think that more than 10% of the animals have circles in their lungs that would make them treif, that's why we have to check them. We don't check all the other treifas because they're not a miyud hamatzi, they're a much smaller percentage. Okay, so that means is with ignoring all the other treifas, we know that we have an assumption, we're working with an assumption that 10% of the animals out there are treifas. Okay, that's working with that assumption. That's why we check lungs in the first place. Well, that's part of the reason. There's really more to it. That's part of the reason why we check them. So, based on that, Rabbi Shechta asked a question. There are others who asked a similar question. But Rabbi Shechta asked a question. He said, look, when Shulchan Aruch and everybody else, 500 years ago, everybody was drinking milk was because they had 3 cows on their farm. They milked the cows, and they had milk from a couple of cows. The din was roiv animals are not treifas, and fine, they were allowed to eat the cows. They were allowed to drink the milk. But
each cow produced
it's right? Well, even if they put all their milk together, so they had a couple of cows worth of milk, and all the milk was mutter. But nowadays, in a milk tank, you have at least 1,000 cows give their milk into one tank. The smallest milk tanks hold like 6,000 gallons. Most of them are much bigger than that, but the smallest ones hold, let's say, 6,000, which comes out to roughly 1,000 cows are giving their milk to that. I'm being generous, okay? 1,000 cows are giving their milk into that, and that means is if 1,000 cows, if you have 1,000 cows giving that, and 10% of cows are treifas, so it's possible that in any random sampling you're going to take, if I go into my backyard and I have 2 cows, my 2 cows might be the kosher ones, because only 10, 1 out of 10 are treif. Even if I have 100 cows, it could be that, I got all the kosher ones. It's possible. It comes out. But the chances that in 1,000 cows, there are no treifas, that's the number that you see over there, okay, 5.7, 45 zeros or digits or whatever you want to call it afterwards. It's a ridiculous number, okay? It's a ridiculous number. It's I don't even know what to call it. It's about it's about a half of a Google. Okay? It's a crazy amount of numbers. It's like the chances that there be not even one treif in there, and the reason is because when something is an average is of 10%. So that means out of 10. It's possible that all 10 are kosher, and at 20 it could be that all kosher, and it could be 30 and 40 and 50, but at a certain point, the statistics catch up with you. At a certain point, you can't, if 1 out of 10 is a treifa, then 1 out of 100, there would be no treifas, it's a very small chance. And the numbers get bigger and bigger to such a ridiculous number that out of 1,000 cows, that there's no treifas. Now, for ours, we don't really care if there are no treifas, but what we care about is what happens if there are more than, in those 1,000 cows, more than 17 treifas. Okay, if there's more than 17 treifas, then the amount of treif milk that's mixed into the kosher milk is not going to be bought to b'shishim. Okay, I don't know, 17 is the right number. Whatever, 17, we have to have an amount that's less than 1.6%, that shouldn't be bottled. So if it's going to be less than 17, now I don't know the math, I was just working on it just a second, I had an idea of how to find it, we may have an answer to exactly what the number is, but it's something similar to this, okay, which is the chances that there, out of 1,000 cows there aren't 17 that are treifas, is also ridiculously low. Okay, it's an amount that's not, it's not what we would consider within reason that should be, that there's not any of them in there. So in Cain, we know that in this vat of 6,000 gallons of milk, we know we have at least an amount that's not bought to b'shishim. The thing is that min b'mina mitzarbanim it needs to be bought to b'shishim. Excuse me, so we have trace milk mixed with kosher milk, so we know that in here, trace milk that's in there is not bought to b'shishim. So how can we drink milk?
That's because the way it works nowadays is that we're mixing milk.
Right, because we milk 1,000 cows, put them together. If I had a farm with 5 cows, and even if I put all that milk together, I was only dealing with a very limited.
If I had 1,000 cows and I milked
each one separately. Right, that's correct. Right, they wouldn't have that problem. But even if I was a big shot and I had a big bucket and I went from cow to cow, how many could I put into it? 3 cows, 5 cows? How much milk can I put together? But I never put 1,000 cows milk together. So in Cain, we know that the amount of treif milk that's in there is not Baal B'Shishin, and if we know that's not Baal B'Shishin, then we can't drink the milk. Rabbi Schechter is so convinced that he's right that he and his real Talmidim don't drink dairy products. They don't eat dairy products. They would eat it from a farm. If they went to the farm and they milked the cow, they would happily eat it. If they would eat it from a cow.
I think you could be a real Talmid from Schechter.
You think so? Okay, well, so different people decide what makes a Talmid.
It's an erroneous question.
Okay, because
The halacha is that if I have a tablet and Bitur tells me it's mutter. I don't have to be choishish.
Okay.
There are other ones in Cambodia or in...
Okay, we're coming to possible answers. I just said the question so far. Okay, I'm coming to answers. Okay. We're going to have 2 possible explanations for why. I mean, all the rest of us drink milk. You know what I mean? So, okay, we're going to come to it. But this is why he and many people who follow what he says, okay, who argue whether they are or not Talmidim, they follow what he...
They may be Talmidim.
Right, okay, and everybody else can be also, okay, fine, and so they won't drink dairy. They say, again, if they went to a farm, if they went to Lamer's Dairy and they watched them milk the Chol Yisrael milk, they would drink some of that milk themselves. That's okay. It's not that anything against milk per se, but it's just that because of this reason. Okay, so before I'm going to give you 2 explanations as to 2 reasons why people have given as to why it wouldn't be true. Okay, why you should disagree about what Rav Schechter is saying. Okay, 2 reasons. But before we get to the reasons why it should be, we just want to bring out a point from our din, which is not a raya against Rav Schechter, it's not a raya against him, but it's just a diuk, an indication, not like what he's saying. And that is, what did it say in our din? In our din it said that if you have, it described the case that a person found that an animal was a treifa, and that's our whole din was about. You found the animal was a treifa, and you had already milked the cow beforehand. If you had milked the cow before it was a treifa, now you found out that this one, they shechted, and they found that it was a treifa. And now the milk, we don't know where the milk is now, because we milked it yesterday, and we found out today that it was a treifa. So there was all kinds of dinim about what happens, but among the dinim was that if that cow if its milk was mixed in with the milk from 60 other cows, then his milk is bottled. It's bottled b'shishin. If it was mixed with 59 cows, and it would not be bottled b'shishin, and you couldn't drink the milk. And that was what the dinim were about. Okay? But the implication truly is that if you didn't have one that was a treifa, you hadn't dafka opened one up and seen that it was a treifa, and you had 60 cows' milk mixed together, that would be okay. It wasn't a problem with having 60 cows, yet the milk from 60 cows mixed together didn't pose a problem to the Mishulchan. He wasn't concerned that you should have that milk together. It's only because we found one was a treifa. We actually shechted one and it turned out to be a treifa. But otherwise, the fact that the 60 cows had milk mixed together, that's okay. Now, 60 cows mixed together is not this high of a percentage, but it's 99.82% sure that there's going to be odd treifa in there. Okay, it's a pretty good chance that is. And you have to remember, only assume that it's 10%. We're working with the number that's only 10% of treifas. The truth is, it would be higher than that, because 10% doesn't mean how much. It could be 15%, and it could be all the other treifas altogether are worth something. 1 in 100, I don't know, 1 in 200. When we add all those numbers together, it adds up to more than 10% in total. More than that in total. But so here in our din, and our din, it happens to be mentioning in passing that there were 60 cows of milk mixed together because it had to do with b'shishin. But no one says, but only if it's 60, but not if it's 200. No one's like stopping us and saying, wait a second, guys, this is only because it's 60. So maybe the person here were not trying to be such mathematicians. But l'chayra, the din is passing right by us about milk from 60 cows mixed together, and no one's making anything about it and saying, it's only because it's this many cows or that many cows. Everyone seems to be very comfortable with what's going on here, having a lot of cows mixed together. So we're not hearing yet why they weren't worried about it, but it sure seems like from this din that it doesn't not what Rav Schechter is saying. Rav Schechter is aware of that. I mean, when he writes what he says, I know that the din says that it says that when the 60 cows mixed together, it's okay. But he's like, what's the reason? It doesn't make sense. He says, what's the problem? What I say is, I know bebur that there's more than 17 cows in that group of 1,000 who are treifas. If I know that for sure there are more than 17 that are treifas, in Cain I have it's not Baal B'Shishin, and all the milk should be treif. Okay. So I'm going to tell you 2 possible answers to 2 ways that people have answered. Again, Rabbi Schechter is not the only one who's asked this question. Others have asked it also. The first one is specifically said, the first answer I'm going to tell you.
Can I say
The question?
Yeah.
wherever Shepters is printed. And I don't remember Hamsi. Could be like contemporary people who've written about like journal articles.
It's a good article by Michael Zilberman in the Journal of Aruch.
Okay, that's correct. Yes, he has an article. Yes, correct. Okay. So one thing is, Rebelsky gave an answer to Shachter's question. Rebelsky wrote about it in two different versions. One was written specifically about the milk question. He wrote about it specifically to address what Shachter said. The other, much more extensively, was when he was writing about the copepods in New York, the bugs in New York's water, where the same kind of a shaila came up in a different way. They had the same. It was a variety, a variation of the same question that this was that question. And he said like this. He said, there's two separate halachas, and the halachas sound very, very similar, okay, but they have nothing to do with each other. Okay, they're very easily confused with each other, and they're not the same at all. Okay, he says one is the hilchos taruvas. Okay, that's the end of this chelik of Shulchan Aruch. It's hilchos taruvas when you have iser mixed with heter. Okay, in those rules there are rules of Bita B'Shishim, Avida, Taima, Davar HaMayim, all kinds of rules of when things are bottled and they're not bottled. All kinds of rules about the whole end of this Chelik Aleph of Shulchan Aruch is about all the things of when things are bottled and when they're not bottled. Okay, that's when we have Isser mixed and Teter. He says there's a completely different set of dinim, which is what happens if I have something in front of me and I don't know if there's Isser or Heter there. I don't know if what I'm holding has Isser or Heter. In that case, there's only one rule. There's always one rule, and that's the same rule all the time, and that is you follow the Roiv. Okay, and if Roiv thinks are mutter, then it's mutter, and if Roiv thinks are not mutter, then it's not mutter. Okay, the rules of...
Is it called a punish?
No. When I have something, I don't have any known isser. I just have a thing that I'm not sure what it is. I pick up something, and I don't know. Is it mutter or is it usser? I have no known isser floating around. I just have a random piece of something that I have. I'm not using that word, but... I'm not using the word, but yeah, it's
what am I using? What am I using?
It's not a right. It's I pick up a potato. Okay, I pick up a potato. Should I think that this? Okay, potato's not losing. We have our animal. So we have our animal. I don't know. Is it a treif or is it not a treif? Okay, so I don't have a reason to think that it is a treif or that it's not a treif. I have just a neutral animal. It's just nothing. Is it a treif or is it not a treif? So in that case, when I'm just dealing with is it or is it not, so I follow the right. So in this case, it'll be a right behavior. So in this case, the right is a right animals are not treifas.
But then you're going to be bodek after you shafted. So what do you mean?
Why am I going?
You are going to be bodek.
I'm bodek it after shafted. So that's a drabanan de that I have to check it after. I'm mechuyev to check it after. But if I don't have, in this case, I don't have a way to check it. The animal's still alive. I don't have a way to check it. So what I do is I follow the right. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to follow the Roiv and say the animal is a question.
In terms of making the milk, I see you talking about.
For anything.
I take a bird. Like birds are kosher, right?
Yes.
So I take a bird. I have no idea. There's no simon. There's no simon. So you say it's mutter.
I have no idea. I never thought of that question.
Tell me if you find the right. What did I say?
I can't believe that's mutter. I don't know why. We have to think about it. In our case, we know what the Roiv is. And I get Roiv behaviors are not treifas.
Okay, then that's the Uber come on.
Okay, cool.
You have some requirement of having a Masorah, so, maybe, you're right.
In the Masorah.
Right, okay. I'm sure that's not the right answer.
You're not only focused on the rice, you're also...
No.
It's not something on color porridge.
Yeah.
Okay, don't go out and just go eat birds. Okay, anyhow. Something doesn't sound right about that. Okay, anyhow, so So Rebelsky's point is, those rules of Hilchos Taruvas only apply when we knew we had an Isser in front of us, and that Isser now got mixed in with the Heter. It's somehow floating around in the Heter. We don't know which one is the Isser and which one is the Heter. So then we have rules. If it's a berry, it's not bottle. If it's a Davar HaMayim, it's not bottle. If it's not Shishim, it's not bottle. All kinds of rules about when things are bottle and when they're not bottle. But all those rules have to do when we know that there's Isser. Okay? And the example of that actually has to do with Hilchos Taruvas. The example of that is, if we have we say we only check vegetables if there's a miyad hamatzah, bugs being in them. Mm-hmm. Okay, even though were there to be a whole bug inside, it would be a barrier, and in Hilchos Taruvas, a barrier would never be bottled. Even if it's 1 in 1,000, it wouldn't be bottled. So if there's 1 in 1,000 have bugs in, let's say, I'll pick something, onions. Okay, let's say 1 in 1,000 onions have bugs in them. Okay, and there would be a barrier in them. You don't have to check them because it's less than a miyad hamatzah. You're not going to check it, even though the bug that's in there is not bottled because it's a barrier. It can't be bottled. But we say we don't care that it's not bottled because the Roy tells me that that my onion doesn't have a bug inside
If
it.
you're eating one onion, what if you're eating 1,000 onions at once?
But that so it doesn't make a difference. No,
you sure?
so he's saying Roy tells me that there's no bugs over here, like David was saying before. I just look at it, I say, I don't have to think about Bitter Bashish. The whole idea is of Bitter Bashish, all that makes a difference.
I think our Shulchan might say if you're eating 1,000 onions at once, you should check.
What? No, the question is, why, he's saying, those two sets of rules, like, that you need Bitter Bashishim, or that a barrier is not bought, all those things only apply when you have known Israel. Like, for example, the din says, if you had a barrier and it got lost in your stuff, then it's all usher. Then all the vegetables are usher. But if you just pick up a vegetable, it might have a berry inside of it, that's okay. It doesn't bother me. Berry is only a problem once I knew that I had an issue here. Here I didn't know I had an issue. Here I just have a theoretical issue in this thing. So I followed the Rav and it's good. Okay. That's the first answer. That's the easier answer.
Okay, how does that answer?
As it,
That answers it if I'm milking one cow.
No, that answers it is, it's the same point, which is, I don't know that
If you assume that was true.
I don't have in other words, if I had an animal that I knew was a treifa, and they got mixed into the rest of the herd, then we'd follow what Rabbi Shachta said. The one animal's in there, I don't know which one it is, I assume that then I'm stuck. I say if its milk is not bought b'shishim mitzvah. But over here, I don't have any known animal that's mixed into the herd. I have no animal that walked up to me and says that he's a treifa. I didn't see an animal there with an extra leg, and I said, oh my gosh, he's a treifa, and now we had a problem. No, I have no idea. I'm just theorizing that there's an extra animal, so then it's about the product.
You know, that's not right.
No, you don't know.
You don't know.
You have which ones they are.
No, you don't have a information.
The statistics telling you that 17 of these 1,000 are chickens.
That's the thing. That's not the statistics. The statistics is not.
No, statistics, it could be Roy, but statistics is not Teruvas. The Hilchas Teruvas that needs to be brought to B'shishim, that's on statistics. If you would have more than 50% of them would be treif, then you'd have a problem. But until then, you don't have to be about the B'shishim, you have to be about the Barai. So about the Barai.
But what's his right in this distinction? It sounds good. But what's his right? We know it's true if there's one.
It's 5 pages. 5 pages to tell you what his right is. Right.
Okay, but...
Say one.
There's a famous Kashrus. By Rabbi Tzacham Amnuim.
Yes.
Right? Rabbi Tzacham Amnuim, there's no mitzvah b'roi. Question is no fault. The question is why. So not the rush, because anything you need vadai. Right? By mice you need vadai to no sense.
That's your valid.
So your vadai to nothing.
Right.
The belt has to kasher. So if Azoi had mother and Rasser, or is it called vadai when they call it Safek, right? So everybody's a Safek Mamzer. It's also life. It's also life.
Right.
Everybody's also old base, or Yichus old based on life. I said you called vadai, so I did Mamzer and Rasser. That's the famous kasher.
Okay.
That is not the Schweizer. The child is because by there's a difference between the Easter come and the rest come.
That's what I'm saying. We'll come. Okay, yeah, go ahead. You finish, go ahead.
Right. But when the rest come on, so life it's a thing. Life is a thing. It's not a life like we call majority. It's a thing. It's a thing. Life it allows me to do, even if it's not bad time, the life allows me to go feel that bad thing. Which may know me also. I said this is all up into all this stuff.
Okay, good. So let's come to a second. Very good. Right to our second test. Very good. Okay, the second answer is. What did you say? I have Rabbi Khan and the Schweitzer. There's close. We're close. Okay.
So one column. We have one column.
So
You're saying it's the first answer. You're saying it's the second answer.
Right, I'm on the second answer. Right, okay. So I don't think it's the same answer. Okay? And the second answer is like this. I'm going to say Rabbi Khan is not saying to answer Rabbi Shechter's question. Rabbi Khan didn't know Rabbi Shechter. Maybe his father, but he didn't know Rabbi Shechter. And Rabbi Moshe has a similar thing. Neither of them took anything to do with what we're talking about. Okay? But the rules that they give us help us understand. Okay? And that is our Gemara that we've been talking about. The Gemara that says Roy behemoths are not treifas. It's a Gemara about roivs in the Gemara Chulin, Daflam, Yudal. And the Gemara says there are two different types of roivs. Okay, the Gemara is not even convinced that they're both true. The Gemara treats them separately. Okay, there's Rubid Isa Kamon and Rubid Lesa Kamon. Okay, so Rubid Isa Kamon, just to say it quickly for everybody else, Rubid Isa Kamon means that we have 10 pieces of meat, and 6 of them are kosher and 4 of them are treif. So then if we find one and we don't know which one it is, we assume that it's from the roiv. The roiv that were kosher, so we assume it's a kosher piece of meat. That's Rubid Isa Kamon. It's based on numbers in front of us. Okay, the Bezdin upstairs, they have 3 dayanim, and they have a question of whether something's mutter raser or chayiv or potter, and 2 people say yes, and 1 person says no. We follow the roiv. Okay, it's Rubid Isa Kamon. It's based on something that's right in front of us. We pick the people in front of us, and they decide yes or no. Okay, Aruba, Blessed Kamon is like our kind of a roiv that we're talking about. Roiv behemoths are not treifas. That's not based on we have a sampling in front of us and we say, are you from the left side of the sample or the right side? It's just that most animals are not treifas and we could follow that roiv also. Okay, it's not based on some kind of statistics in front of us. Maybe it's based on statistics theoretically, but it's in front of us. It's not because most of the animals in Wisconsin we know were counted up as the treifas or they're not treifas. It's just it's a different kind of variety. Okay. Okay. There's other ways of being mavaris feikas also. We have chazakas and called the parish. Other ways of being mavaris feikas, but these are a bunch of different ways. Primarily these two roivs and some other ways of being mavaris feikas. So now, the Torah says that these two roivs work very differently from each other. Okay, we'll say it first in our one way, and then we use more yeshivsha words if it make you feel better. Okay, the Aruch the Isakaman, a roiv based on things that are in front of us, and also chazaka and kol deparish. Those kind work that when we're not sure what we're supposed to do, we're not sure should we say mutar asher. So there's a question in the medicine, okay? You're chayiv a potter. Okay, so there's three people. Two people said chayiv, one said potter. What are we supposed to do? We don't know what to do. Two dayanim said this way, one dayanim said this. What are we supposed to do in that case? So the Torah says what you should do is follow the roiv. So by Aruch the Isakaman, we have one piece of meat. Is it from the Kashrus side or is it from the treif side? We don't know where it came from. So the roiv says it comes from whatever the roiv was. That's what it came from. The Torah is telling us how we should act. We call that a hanhaga. Okay, it's not telling us that that's the truth. There's three dayanim. Like Ramesh says, there's three dayanim who voted on a certain way. It could be the one dayan who loses. He's much smarter. It could be, you know what? It could be next door in the next bezin. There's 500 dayanim who agree with him. Okay, but it doesn't make a difference. He could be 100% right. But Torah is telling us when you're not sure what you're supposed to do, in front of you have these three dayanim, and they say this is what you're supposed to do. You follow the roiv, and that's what you do. Okay, Rabbi Chanan, he says a riot. He says, what happens if you have? The Gemara says if you have a man throws a get to his wife, and you're not sure whether the get landed closer to him or closer to her. Okay, you're not sure where the get landed. So we say the Cheskes Ish says that she's not divorced. He says, do you think that the Cheskes Ish decides that the get landed closer to the man? It's ridiculous. He says, right, because Cheskes, so people who are married, their get to land closer to the men. That's how it works. What does that mean? Like there's a force repelling it from her? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Of course, it's not. We don't think it has anything to do with truth. We're not guessing that means that that's the truth of what happened. It's a way of. The Torah tells us when you're not sure what happens, there are rules of what you're supposed to do. And in this case, what you do is you follow the chazaka. The chazaka, she was married before him, so she stays married, and we have to. But we're not thinking that the get landed closer to him. The chazaka can't prove that, but the chazaka tells us that's what we should do.
It's a hanhaga.
Hanhaga, yeah, it's a hanhaga.
Opposed to a birur.
Right, as opposed to Aruch the lesser common. Aruch the lesser common, like Roy Behemoth is in Treifas. Aruch the lesser common, the Torah is telling us that we should act as if we now know that that's the truth. Okay, now that is to say, when the Torah tells us to do birurim, we don't really know that that's the truth, but we act as if we know it's the truth. For example, when we have two eidim, which is the best beer that you could have. Okay, two eidim is the best beer. We don't know that two eidim are telling the truth. They could be lying. I mean, it's happened before that eidim have lied. But the Torah tells us to act as if we know the truth. Okay, so when we have a Aruch with the lesser come on, the Torah is telling us to say to us, act. Don't just use it as a hanhaga. Use that. This is a beer. This is telling us that that's the truth that happened. It may or may not be, but as far as we're concerned, that means. Now, you would think that a Aruch with the lesser come on is therefore stronger. It's based on a beer that makes it stronger. Rabbi Chanan says, lav dafka. Okay, so you would think that beer is better than just a hanhaga. That should be better. So he says, as I just said to you, two eidim is considered the best rye that there is, the best beer that there is. So he says, Aruch the lesser come on. Tosfos brings a day that when there's a tray, when there's two eidim saying yes and two eidim saying no, in that case, Aruch the lesser come on is not going to work. Even though a chazaka will work in that case. Okay, even though a chazaka will work in that case. And the reason why the Aruch lesser come on doesn't work in that case is exactly the strength of the Aruch lesser come on is its weakness in this case. Aruch lesser come on can only work when it's going to be mavar what happened. It can't possibly be mavar what happened when there's tray, because you can't have something stronger than a rye of two eidim. It can't possibly be mavar, and therefore since it can't work, its mechanics of working is through being mavar things. In this case, birurim are not going to help. We're maxed out for birurim, so it doesn't work. But chazaka could work. Chazaka just says if you don't know what to do, you follow the chazaka. So the chazaka could work, even though a birur can't work. The chazaka could work. Another case, if you have one piece of treif meat get mixed into two pieces of kosher meat. Okay, so what's it in? We say kol the parish, and if a piece of meat falls out of the pile, you say kol the parish, and you can eat the piece of meat. Okay, but guess what? You're going to end up eating all three pieces of meat, That's the truth. The din is, you're allowed to eat all 3 pieces of meat, because each one of them you can say called the parish, and you could eat that piece of meat. Okay? Now, that can't possibly work as a birur. It would be ridiculous to think that we were mavarer, that all 3 pieces were kosher. It's ridiculous. That we know that they're not all kosher. We know that only 2 of them are kosher, not 3. But when we work with the Hanalga, the Torah tells us when you don't know what to do, the piece that falls out is considered mutter. Okay, so the piece that was parish, I'm allowed to eat it. I don't know that it's kosher. I don't care that it's kosher. I follow the rules the Torah said. Torah said, I'm allowed to eat the piece of meat. So I'm allowed to eat the piece of meat. It wasn't mavarer at all. Okay, so that is to say, with this, we're going to be able to understand why people don't agree with Rabbi Shafter, and we'll understand Rabbi Shafter also. Both, at the same time. And really, at the same time. And that is it is. Since, this is what David was saying, I think, before him, was that since Roiv Behemoth Einim Treifus is a Ruba de Lesser Kamon, it's mevarer to us that the animal in front of us is not a treifa. That means you can make that beer for 1,000 animals also. Okay, the Ruba de Lesser Kamon says it's mevarer. It doesn't tell us how we should act. It doesn't say to us, act as if there are no treifas. If it just told us to act as if, it couldn't tell us to act as if, because we would acting as if we would know that there's treifa mixed into it. The Ruba de Lesser Kamon tells us that we know that these animals are all kosher. So the 1,000 animals that gave milk to this tank, they're all kosher. Now, magically that means that basically all the animals in the world are kosher, because all the animals that are giving milk, we're now going to decide they're all kosher, but that's okay, as long as, if it makes a beer, it tells us that all the animals are kosher. Okay? And that's why, so we don't say, oh, no, there are 17 treif animals mixed into here. No. We will mavara that there are no treif animals. Roy tells us that every single one of these is kosher. Okay? But at the same time, we understand good and well now what Rabbi Shach is saying, because, just like I said to you, I didn't say it, Rabbi Chanan said it. In the case of trey, we don't let a Ruba de Lesser Kamon work. Ruba de Lesser Kamon does not work by trey. Even in Taisus, that doesn't work, because you can't be Mavar, you can't bring Birurim when you have trey. You can't have more Birur than that. That is to say, a Ruba de Lesser Kamon has a weakness that since it can only work through Birur, then when Birur is not possible, it doesn't work anymore. Okay, so that means so Rabbi Shach says, okay, if it's 5.7 and 45 zeros, okay, to 1, that it's not true, then Birur can't work over here. How are you going to say, I have a birur that these 1,000 cows are all kosher? It's not possible. It's like trey. Because he'll look at it and say, it's as if there's trey over here. When there's trey, he says, I can't bring a better ride than trey. Again, we don't know that trey, the 2 Eidim telling the truth, but from the tourist perspective, the 2 Eidim are assumed to be the highest level of birur that there is. I say, when I have trey, another birur is not going to help me. So I have also 5.7 zillion over here, and that tells me also that I know that it's not true. So then, in other words, if it would just be Ruba de Isa come on, maybe I could have gotten away with it. But because it's Ruba de Lesser Kamon makes why I cannot get away with it, because I have to be mevarer it. So the answer these people are giving is, well, it's a birur. And it's a birur that 1,000 cows are kosher. And like he said, all the treif animals are in Cambodia. Okay, no. He says, but it's not possible to be mevarer when I know that there's a zillion chances to 1 that the animals are there are treif, then I know that the animals that I have in front of me are treif, and therefore the birur cannot work. Okay, just to help put it into perspective, we've mentioned a couple of times, some cipher who says that if there's a 100,000 to 1 chance that something is true, okay, even for suffix sakana that doesn't count. Okay, some cipher says that if there's 100,000 to 1 chance that something is not true, then even for suffix sakana you don't have to worry about his cases. We've mentioned it. The people who were people who assumed to be dead who turned out they were not dead. Okay, so some cipher says that it's 100,000 to 1 chance that's going to happen. Mamash doesn't happen once in 100,000 times, and therefore even for suffix sakana, which is the most serious chashash, even the smallest chashash, we're not chashash for that possibility. You just bury them right away. Don't worry about the fact that he might be really alive and he might be basically killing somebody. Okay, you don't have to worry about that because such a far out chashash. Okay, 100,000 to 1 is so for sure. You don't have to worry about sakana. So that means this is trillions of times more than 100,000 to 1. So we would look at it and say, guys, it can't be there's a birur against this when the numbers tell us it's not possible. Okay? That's how he would look at it. Okay, now, and that helps us a little bit answer our kasha or our diak from the Shulchan Aruch here. In the case of the Shulchan Aruch, the chances are only work out to about 500 to 1. If you have 60 cows mixed together, chances are 500 to 1 that there's no treifas mixed into it. Okay, so that's a very good chance, and all of us would put money on the fact that one of those 60 cows is a treifa. I mean, chances are, chances are 500 to 1 that it is. We would put money that there is a treifa into there.
500?
Not 500 to 1. 500 odds, the odds of,
Saying what, 10%?
right, if it's 10%, then the odds are 500 to 1, that's a trade. But wait a second, the 500 to 1 is not yet strong enough to say I can't bring the bearer. If 500 to 1, it's not some surface 100,000 to 1. It's still within a range of,
What's the official number? Is there like official number?
no, I don't know what the number is. No, stop it. No, stop it. I'm not, well, some surface says 100,000. That's I'll work off his perspective. It's not negate to me. I'm saying you can't be indicted. In the case of the Mechaber, there was only 60 animals. In that case, it's still not at a point where we say it's impossible. When I see that number, I say, I know that I can't be invited. What happens when I get to 10,000 to 1? We'll deal with it. That's not my problem. I have to answer the deal here.
You sure the numbers are right?
What?
Sorry, you don't understand right.
Okay, I'll show you the numbers afterwards.
Between Matir and Aguna, when you rely on something which would be a siman mufak, that you're not worried about making an error, so we say if it's 1,000 to 1, so you don't have to worry.
1,000 to 1, okay. Okay, so now, you should know, where do you get the number 1,000 to 1 from?
It's help us, Kashrus mentions.
Is that what it says there?
The 960,
No, I only ask you because... Okay, I'll tell you why I'm asking afterwards. Okay. Okay. Now, I have to say something else. I have to say also, I'll just throw in also, that we're making an assumption. This is all making an assumption. I don't know this enough, though. We'll correct this. I might be wrong.
Shach is cholik on that too. Shach says if you have like a tragedy in which there are 5,000 people who are killed and you to find like the remains of someone, then it has to be a probability of greater than there's a margin of error of less than 5,000 to 1 in such a case.
Because
the pool is larger, of potential people who this could be.
Okay.
It might be easily shitasa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so we're making an assumption over here. The Mekilim, that's all of us.
Yeah.
I don't want to insult anybody. Most of the people in the room here who eat Muslims are making an assumption. This answer is making an assumption that it's a Ruba de Lesa Kaman. Okay. We have two reasons to think that it's not really Ruba de Lesa Kaman. Okay. First of all one is, if you remember, I mentioned to you last time, it's Ferris Tzvi who says the Ruba de Lesa Kaman of Roy Behem is not being trefes creates a chazak also. So even if he's not even convinced anymore, we talked about this last time, there might not be a Roy Behem ain't in trefes anymore, but we might only be matar amut because of a chazaka, a cheskes kashrus that the animal had, which was originally based on the Roy, but it's a chazaka. In which case, if it's a chazaka, then this whole answer falls apart because we don't need a beer. A chazaka is just a hanaga, just a way of dealing with it. It's not a beer at all. Okay. The other thing is that it's not clear to me. I don't know enough about this to say this, but when we have milk from 1,000 cows sitting in a tank, is that Roy Behemoth ain't in trefus, or is that called the parish and Ruba parish? Okay. When we're looking at those cows, is that really Roy Behemoth ain't in trefus? Or, because our diyun is not on the cow, our diyun is on the milk. Did this milk that I'm holding in my cup, or in this tank, did that milk come from the kosher animal or from the treif animal? I'm not convinced that thing is it's a Ruba Lesa Kaman that creates, tells us what went on in the farm, and now I have a cold parish.
Don't we know for a fact that the milk comes from all the behemoths? You said we were talking about.
It did come from all the behemoths, but when when I pick up a cup, when I look at, this tank has all those cows together.
Right.
Let's say this. It came from 1,000 cows, but which 1,000 cows? There's zillions of cows out there, so which cow did it come from? So I say it was parish, the milk that I got was parish at this point from the cow that it came from. So if it's called a parish, then again the whole answer doesn't work. Because called a parish is a hanaga. If we're trying to say we're making a beer, I'm not convinced that this is working with Ruba Lesa Kaman. The Ruba Lesa Kaman is what told us that the animal is kosher. But I'm not dining on the animal. I'm dining on milk. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure if that's right or wrong. Other people understand that better. Anyhow, that was a show.